Hello, movie monkeys, and welcome to our brand new podcast channel, Have You Ever Seen? If you look at Ryan Ellis' Top 100 Project, you will see previous episodes we've done many years ago when we were the Top 100 Project. But now that we're Have You Ever Seen, we've got this channel instead. I'm Ryan Ellis, and this is my wife, Bev.
Hi.
What we're going to do today is talk about A Star is Born, of course. That's the whole podcast you'll hear after this video opening. But there's some things I want to talk about when it comes to an error that I made, and also a theory I had while editing. So after this on-camera portion, you'll get the entire podcast just as you would find it on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, etc., with no changes at all to that. So first, a correction about A Star is Born. The names of the two main characters often change in the other movies. I mentioned there are 3 other ones, and I think I said something about how it's Norman Maine, except for the 2018 version where it's Jackson Maine. But even that's not entirely consistent because he was John Norman Howard. Chris Christopherson was in the 1976 one, not Norman Maine. And also Esther is the name of Barbra Streisand's character in 76 and in the Janet Gaynor version. But Judy Garland is called Vicky Lester in the 1954 one. So I was incorrect. Well, actually, Ryan, fix that now. And I just did. And then the theory I had about A Star is Born. So this is a guy, Jackson Maine, who he says could never really hear. Or maybe it was when he was young, but this isn't recent. This isn't because he's a rock star he can't hear.
Did he say like a gun went off by his head or something?
Is that what it was?
Or an explosive?
But it's been a
firecracker?
long time, is the point. So I wondered if maybe what it came down to is that this is a guy who doesn't feel connected to the world. He's always having to say to, especially Bobby, huh? What was that? And he's probably had to fake that he actually heard what many people have said his whole life. And now that he can't even drink, he can't do drugs, if he's really going to stay that way, be clean, what is the point of living even more so if he can't even really get by in the world and never really could?
Metaphorically, that might be the case. But I saw it more of a device to illustrate to the audience that he's a person that doesn't care about himself. He doesn't take care of himself. This is something that he could be doing something about. He could be taking better care of his ears, but it's yet another way that he's self-destructive.
Okay. And by the way, if you're suicidal, we maybe should mention this in the podcast. If you're suicidal or know someone who is, right here is a Wikipedia link to crisis lines. And that's to, apparently, what I saw, every country. We were going to do to Canada and U.S. because, of course, we focus mostly on North America. But this, what I found online, is just every country. So if you're struggling or you know someone who is, then contact the link that you probably just saw at the bottom of the screen.
Maybe we underserved that topic because the more I think about it, the more I think the movie might be a little bit irresponsible by having a hero, this person that we're with through the whole film, have him kill himself in what could be interpreted as a noble way. I think a lot of people, when they're that down, when they're suicidal, they really think the world would be a better place without them. And the movie makes the argument that she will be better off without him. But that's not true, ever. So if you're feeling down, don't let this movie give you the wrong message. Take care of yourself. People love you. People care about you. So.
Good advice. And on that sad note, let's talk about Darren Aronofsky's The Whale. The Whale. I say it like that because of James Whale. Anyway, so The Whale, which we saw in late December. It's similar to A Star is Born in that the main character is committing suicide slowly. Bradley Cooper is ingesting alcohol and drugs, and Charlie, of course, is eating and eating and eating. I like the movie more than you did, but not by that much.
Yeah, we didn't love it.
Fraser's good, I think, wearing a fat suit, of course, the whole time. Gives a solid performance. I don't know if it's quite worthy of the standing ovations you heard about some of the festivals back a couple months ago. Hong Chow, I think, is the best thing in the movie with her no-nonsense performance. I like Sadie Sink a little more than you did as the daughter, but God, we haven't sworn yet, so geez, she is one note. This actually, the podcast is R-rated. Anyway, she's very one note, even in Stranger Things, even though I like her so much. I'm always drawn to her when she's in bigger scenes in Stranger Things. She's the one I'm always looking at, not just because she is cute and maybe even pretty, but there's something about her. But in this movie and in Stranger Things, she doesn't get to play a lot of different notes, if you will. So you didn't like her that much at all. But anyway, your thoughts on the movie?
I just thought overall it was so over the top modeling. Also, there's somebody that we know and care about who's a big fat guy in a wheelchair.
Who has that same name.
Who also happens to be called Charlie. And I think...
And then Ellie is almost our last name.
It's true. Okay, so we're giving away he's a member of our family. And he's someone that we care about a lot. And the thought of anybody in the world looking at him with the same pity that this movie's asking us to look at this character with. There was just something about it, and I can't totally put my finger on it, but it really turned me off, and it really felt like an inappropriate way to deal with, at the very least, a disability, because on top of his weight, the weight makes him disabled, but the way they handle his disability felt very uncomfortable to me. And just the way they handle somebody in this situation really rubbed me the wrong way.
You also know that people are going to assume that the title of the movie refers to Fraser's overweight character, not Moby Dick, which is what it's supposed to refer to.
Okay, but
that's a very big running theme. So that's also a mistake, I think, there, even though Aronofsky's made many great films. Part of the problem, too, is that this is The Wrestler, especially the ending, all over again. Even Black Swan, you could even say Mother or Requiem for a Dream are very similar to this. So he's done this before. The acting is fine, if not quite good at times in this. And he'll probably get rewarded with nominations at the Oscars, but whew, I wish it was better. It's not bad, but not that great. Another connection, by the way, to A Star is Born is that the cinematographer on both of them was Matthew Libatique.
Oh, no kidding.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like the look of the whale either. Okay. It was so sallow, and I know it was intentional, but it's a big choice to have the audience live in that palette for an entire 2 hours. How long is it? It's a long one, too. Yeah. Okay, it felt longer than 2 hours.
Okay, next topic is Elf. Not that timely, but it's only about a week from Christmas, and we're recording this a few days after Christmas. I watched the ending on YouTube after Christmas. I was just curious to see it again. We watched the movie before, actually, a couple days before Christmas. And I had a thought about the James Caan character. So the movie's supposed to be about Buddy finding family and finding acceptance. But James Caan's on the naughty list when the movie starts. And I think that it's all about getting him off the naughty list. Maybe that seems obvious, but here's a specific reason why. Santa's sleigh flies when Michael sees the huffboard in the sleigh. Charlotte Dennen, the news reporter, when she hears about the engagement ring, the clausometer nearly goes full at that point, but the sleigh's not really flying that much higher in the air when that happens. When Walter Hobbs, so Caan's character, is called to task by his son for not actually singing Santa Claus is Coming to Town, the minute he goes, is coming to town, the sleigh goes way up in the air. And I guess at that point, because he's finally put his family first, truly put his family first, Walter Hobbs is redeemed and he's no longer on the naughty list.
The whole thing was just to fix the Christmas spirit in the world.
Wasn't about Buddy, wasn't about Jovi, wasn't about Michael, wasn't even about Christmas. It was about the book publisher.
They adopted that baby from the orphanage just to fix Santa's sleigh.
It's a long con. Oh man, didn't even mean that to mean what I thought.
I think that's just a movie that maybe we've seen one too many times if we're getting this deep in the weeds with it. But that's not true, because you can never see Elf too many times.
All right, so our first video is just about done. We'll wrap by saying thanks for listening, of course, or watching, I guess, in this case. What you'll get for the next 56-ish minutes is the entire A Star is Born podcast. So if you've already heard it, or you'd rather just hear on your device like you maybe always did before, then go ahead and do that. Nothing will really change. It'll be the graphic, the logo that we've created on screen the whole time. Please continue watching this video, but you don't have to, because that's not going to be anything different than what you found if you listen to the podcast. We'll be back next week with Out of Sight. We may not be on camera for it. We're not always going to do this probably, but if we are, then we are. The podcast in its entirety will go up regardless in a week, and I'll be back with Sherlock Jr. in just 4 days, the end of this week. Anything else you want to say?
Just hi. Bye.
All right, then. On to the podcast. Where's that slate? Show it one more time. We worked hard printing that picture out, damn it. Tell me something, boys and girls. Would you give Sparkplug Coffee a whirl? And do you like saving dough? Then you should use our promo code to save 20% off your next order. They'll ship it to you in Canada and the States. They've got plans and a roast to suit your taste. Okay, before Lady Gaga comes in with her superior singing talents and wipes the floor with me, I'm going to just start speaking to you now. So I mentioned that promo code, and as of right now, today, we have a new one. Since this is the first time we're officially calling ourselves Have You Ever Seen, our discount code is now HYES. What you can do now, in fact, is go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and have at it. Now what you're going to get from Sparkplug are premium Arabica beans. They're always fairly traded. They got decaf, half calf, quarter calf. Wait, not that one. And they even have a rotating seasonal blend. When you complete your order, they'll be shipping it to any of you Canadians or Americans within a week. So you know it's going to be fresh and at just the peakest of peak flavors. And that delivery to my fellow Canucks is free as a bird. If you want to get your beans on a regular basis, then be part of the Autopilot Coffee Club. It's flexible and you can customize it to suit your coffee needs. They throw scorn at any notions of it being a simple Coffee of the Month club, too. It's not. And you'll save money on every order if you become a member. Those one-timers, man, they're paying more than you clubbers. And, psst, you members also get to enjoy perks, like gifts and other deals that non-members just don't get. And you can pause or cancel any old time you want. So get some Sparkplug today. And don't forget to use our brand new promo code. I'll say it again, HYES. It's a new year, which means it's going to be cold for many months yet. So it's absolutely time for your number one cup of Java to start emanating from your very own cozy kitchen. Plug that thing in at sparkplug.coffee.
And action! Have you ever seen
A Star is Born? Hello everybody and welcome to a new era here on this long-running channel that does classic film reviews. As we just discussed in the Sparkplug promo, which you should not have skipped over, this is the very first episode with our new name.
Have you ever seen?
For those who are new and don't know our previous work, we were the Top 100 project for nearly 10 years, but that name was antiquated, so we finally changed it. If all went well with the changeover, our archive of 481 previous episodes is right here with this one. You can scroll back and look for chats about hundreds of some of the best-known films in cinema history. Just note that every entry on this channel will now be considered a separate episode, so if you go back and hear numbers that don't jibe, oh well, we're tidying things up, and this is the 482nd edition of this podcast. We also have to thank Bev's brother-in-law, Andrew Luther, for writing that new theme music you just heard. He's been teaching himself how to play keyboard for the past year, and he got good enough that we recruited him for this gig. So thanks, Mr. Luther. As for us, I'm the gravelly-voiced guy who has trouble reversing his car because he has tears in his eyes after his brother said something really nasty to him, Ryan Ellis. And here's the not-so-shy lady with bad hearing who nevertheless enjoys a good round of karaoke, especially if it will launch her career into the stratosphere, my wife, Bev.
What was that? I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, touché. And it's also you. That's me, as you like to say.
That's me.
So not only is this a new era of this podcast, but it's also the start of the 8th annual Month of Bev. She's programmed our January schedule, in which we'll cover 5 films, although you'll also be getting 3 more of those oral essays that I've been doing by myself in recent months, including one later this week. More on that at the end of this episode. The coming attractions trivia for this week's picture, A Star is Born. There was a version of A Star is Born that the studio wanted to make before Bradley Cooper got his hands on it, and convinced them that Lady Gaga could carry a movie. What was the unusual combination of director and lady star Warner Brothers was hoping for?
Well, you say before Cooper got his hands on it, but Cooper was supposed to play the lead still, but he wasn't meant to direct. Clint Eastwood was going to direct, and Beyonce was supposed to play the part, the Allie part. I don't know if she still would have been called Allie. But then she got pregnant, and she had to drop out.
I didn't know about the Cooper thing, but I knew Eastwood was right and Beyonce was right. What a strange combination. Although Eastwood did play the honky-tonk man when Beyonce was 1. So there's a connection, I guess. And if he had played Jackson Maine...
Honky-tonk man.
It's a movie from 1982 or something like that. He plays a rockabilly kind of guy, a country singer. I think it's more of a rockabilly thing. Similar in some ways to what Cooper does here, I guess. So they had musical history with Eastwood. Big jazz guy. He also directed Jersey Boys a few years before. And it's also Clint Eastwood and Warner Brothers, so it may have just been, if he says he wants to do it, he gets to do it. Although he didn't in the end. He's not even involved, even though he's friends with Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, they worked together on American Sniper.
Huge hit from 2014, a few years before this, and it was one of the first, if not the first, no, not the first, it was one of the first times Cooper was nominated for anything at the Oscars. Okay, Hanging with Mr. Cooper. Let that one sink in for a minute. Was released by Warner Brothers going on 5 years ago on October 5th, 2018. It was a smash hit, both at home and abroad. Bev, the movie's 4.5-ish years old. Please remind us what it's about and give us a skinny on A Star is Born.
Bradley Cooper is Jackson Maine, an aging rock star with a drinking problem, who meets and falls for Lady Gaga's Ally, an aspiring songwriter and performer. Jackson takes Ally on the road with him, and the two fall deeply in love as she joins his band, performing her songs with him. As Ally's star is rising, Jackson's problems with addiction drag him down and drag Ally along with him. Unable to overcome his own demons, Jackson takes his own life, leaving Ally and his long-suffering brother behind.
Or, in a nutshell, addict traumatizes his dog and leaves an awful sight for his loving wife to discover. Also ruins that belt, makes a mess in the garage.
Wastes the perfectly good drugs.
Yeah. Made sure to get high before he did kill himself. That's an interesting touch, too. The very first thing we see him do in this movie, he gets high and then goes right out and performs. And the last thing he does in this movie is gets high on pills both times. Maybe alcohol, too, but we see pills specifically in both cases. And at the end, of course, he's not rocking out. He's hanging out. Again, that's a little cruel, isn't it?
Jesus.
Okay, the Rotten Tomatoes numbers on this movie are very strong. 90% of critics like the film. 8 out of 10 is the average. There are 532 reviews on the site, and 80% of audiences. The 1937 version of this movie, there have been 4 versions now. That has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, so everybody that reviewed it liked it. The 1954 Judy Garland, James Mason one, 98%. And the 1976 one with Streisand and Chris Christopherson, only 35%. This film was 11th at the 2018 U.S. box office. Green Book, the Best Picture winner, and a competitor with this one at the Oscars for that category, and others probably too. That was 36th. Hereditary, which we loved that year, was 67th. No Oscar nominations for that one. Should have had some. And The Favorite, which was up against Green Book and A Star is Born and others for Best Picture and some other big awards, was 81st. We covered that only a few months ago back in 2022. Weird to say back in 2022 because we're recording this still in 2022, and it's only January 2nd when this episode goes up. A Star is Born was nominated for 8 Oscars, and it won one of them. That was Best Song. Great choice, one of the great best songs, certainly of the modern era, maybe ever. Lady Gaga and Mark Ronson were among the winners of that award. She was up for Best Actress, but didn't win that. Cooper was up for Best Actor, didn't win that. It was up for Best Picture, Supporting Actor Sam Elliott, the Adapted Screenplay, Matthew Libatique's cinematography, and the sound.
Did Cooper get a win for the song? Because he does perform the song.
No, it's all about writing the song. That's why Celine didn't win for My Heart Will Go On and Titanic. And Taraji P. Henson, maybe she was joking or something, but she said, where's my Oscar for It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp from Hustle and Flow? But she didn't write it. It's 3 6 Mafia?
Yeah, yeah.
Neither did Terrence Howard. He didn't get an award for that either. Streisand, by the way, won an Oscar for Best Song for Evergreen, so that's the 76 version. She, of course, had won Best Actress before that. Gaga being up against Olivia Colman and Glenn Close. We'll never know where she ranked in the voting, but she was certainly probably at least 3rd. Coleman was a surprise winner, but probably the best choice for it.
I think she was, yeah.
And if Gaga was going to win one award and not 2 that night, the right one won. It was the song.
Hey, we've covered 2 movies in a row that won Best Song at the Oscars.
And this one is 9 million times better than the one in The Poseidon Adventure. This is the 3rd version of A Star is Born to get nominations for both leads, by the way. 1937 version did, and the 1954 version did. Okay, well, you chose this, so we know you like it an awful lot. Tell us what you think of A Star is Born. Probably, 3rd, maybe even 4th viewing?
It's at least 3rd. There's scenes that I've seen over and over again on YouTube. But I just adore this movie. Partly because I think there's a real dearth of good, tragic love stories being made in Hollywood. I don't know why, but a tragic romance doesn't seem to get greenlit often enough, and they're just so appealing. But also just because it's wonderful. It feels really honest and authentic. It loves the characters while still fully seeing their flaws. And every time I see it, I cry a little harder at the end than the last time I saw it.
You would have cried probably more if it hadn't been for the dog saying, we have to go outside.
I know.
And also love us to pick us up. You're trying to recover from the last song in this movie and his suicide. You were in tears. You would have been in more tears if it weren't for them.
I told you, if you hadn't been in the room...
Fucking dogs.
I would have been sobbing. You kept me more behaved, I think, than the dogs did, because I would have sobbed in front of the dogs. But I was holding back those hiccuping, heaving, ugly cry sobs. I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of you.
But I wasn't the one demanding your attention, though, at that point.
No, the dogs did spoil it a little bit, but it's fine.
It's very emotional at the end. For all kinds of reasons. And we know already, we really learned even more so, that Lady Gaga is one hell of a singer. This movie's not a musical, but there are a ton of tunes in it. Most of them seem to be originals. La Vie en Rose, of course, is not. She performs that at the drag bar, and that's when he falls for her. Jackson sings Let the Old Ways Die very briefly at the end of that night in the drag bar when most of the people are gone. Shallow won the Oscar, and it should have, but you've also got some excellent tunes that Gaga sings. Always Remember Us This Way. That's her entry to stardom, and after that, Rez Wants to Manage Her. Maybe he would have anyway, but that really clinched it. And at the end, the one that made you want to cry so much, and you did cry a little bit, is I'll Never Love Again, which Jackson had written. And one of the nice things about this movie is that he lives again briefly. You see that a lot in modern movies where somebody dies tragically, they're murdered or something, or in this case commits suicide, but they come back with something like this, where it's a flashback. We see it's his song that she's singing. Maybe she tweaked something or changed something about it, but it seems like she's singing the song he wrote, and we see him briefly when he was clean, singing the song and playing it on piano for her.
It's the song that he left in a notebook that she found while he was in rehab, and she brings to him and says, what's this?
Oh, no.
So you say this isn't a musical. I disagree. I think this is explicitly a musical.
Well, they're not doing the thing where it's, let's get married.
Okay, but is Cabaret a musical? Because
Debatably.
in Cabaret, every song is diegetic. They never just break out spontaneously into song. Every song is incorporated into the nightclub act, but the movie shows the entire song, so they consider it a musical.
Nashville's like that, too. School of Rock is like that.
Are those movies musicals?
I don't know.
I would say the line is crossed in A Star is Born. A Star is Born, in my opinion, is a musical.
Well, I'm on record saying that I do like certain musicals that really make it work. Singing in the Rain, Wizard of Oz, Hairspray, South Park. There are other ones. But so many of the old musicals, and modern ones too, just seem so phony to me, where it's two people like us sitting here and then suddenly we break into song. I don't really buy it. But movies like this, it makes more sense the way they do it, the ones I just mentioned as well. Yes, they're singing within the movie and a lot of songs in the movie, very talented people, but it feels more earned. And at the same point, to me, that isn't a musical in the way I think of them, because so many of them, to me, feel, even the good ones, a lot of the times, feel phony.
And the style of the film is verite, almost documentary style, the way the camera's following them around, the way the plot seems to just kind of happen in this movie. There's not a lot of driving plot, or there is, but there's huge scenes that we don't see, kind of in the style of a documentary. If the camera wasn't there, you don't see it. And all these things happen in the film where I guess we assume the camera wasn't there, but we're just supposed to kind of carry on and follow it. So it has that really grounded, realistic verite feel, which is very unusual for a musical.
This movie does feel pretty real, especially considering Bradley Cooper was not a guitar player or a singer 6 months to a year before this, and he worked hard for about half a year on both of those things. He went into it thinking, I'm a good actor, I can do this. Oh, wait a minute, I need a lot more work and training than I thought I did. And of course, Gaga had acted, but she had, I think, more humility than he did at first, thinking, I'm going to need help to get through this. So Bradley directed me so well. Bradley did this and Bradley did that. I don't mean to mock her, but I got to make that point because we talked about it during the award season, or maybe when they promoted this film, which was not that far apart. It was a late year release. Well, I guess October, I said, right? Anyway, you see her on the award circuit, and does no one call him Brad? It's always Bradley, Bradley, Bradley with her.
What did he call her when he was talking about her?
I don't know. I would think
Stephanie?
people would call her Gaga. Yeah.
Did he call her Lady Gaga on set, or did he call her Stephanie?
It was probably either Gaga or maybe it was Steph.
It's probably Gaga. I think people just call her Gaga, but if you're actually her friend, do you call her Gaga?
Do you know where she got that from?
No. Should I?
There's a song by Queen called Radio Gaga.
Uh-huh.
All we hear is Radio Goo Goo, Radio Gaga.
I'm familiar with the song.
That's where she got her name from.
Ah.
And as we said, if it didn't get stepped over there, Stephanie Germanotta is her actual name. And I think one day she'll go by that. Maybe like the rappers do. Mm-hmm. They have the name that they like, that's cool, that's hip to them. Some of them are pretty silly. And then as they get an acting career, the ones that do, suddenly, oh man, my real name comes out.
Well, she's kind of transitioning into an acting career. She was in House of Gucci. She doesn't seem to be making new music and touring and making music videos anymore. That whole persona may go away as she transitions, or maybe she'll do something brand new. Who knows? She's quite the Renaissance woman.
And Cooper's a Renaissance man. The talents we've seen out of this guy in all these years. You look back when he first started making it as an actor in Wedding Crashers, where he plays the bad guy. And, of course, the Hangover movies, where he's cool and everything. But to think he'd end up being a multiple award-nominated actor, 9 times he'd been nominated for Oscars. Not always for acting, for producing sometimes, and for writing this. Didn't get nominated for directing, which he probably should have. But he's become a guy that I really like a lot. We haven't covered him that much over the years. We did Silver Linings Playbook a few months ago. And we also did American Hustle in a way, because we covered both that and Wolf of Wall Street for the Now Playing project. We did when movies were in the theaters. We started, I think it was the end of 2013, early 2014. We were doing movies like that, always 2 at once, or almost always 2 at once. And by the way, we're going to redo some of those movies this year, some of our favorites that we didn't really talk that much about because we had just seen it and recorded it. But we've barely ever covered this guy who I think has become one of my favorite modern actors. He does show his range over and over again, and certainly in this film.
Yeah, he's the real deal. And his performance in this movie, it's really beautiful. It's this lovely balance between the dark side of Jackson's addiction and his self-loathing with the pathos of a good man who just can't get ahead of his demons.
Cooper himself was an alcoholic as well, so we can relate to this, I think. And of course, you got a person who's actually a world-renowned, gigantic rock star. Well, rock music, whatever she plays, pop music, for many years, playing somebody who starts to become that exact same thing within the movie.
Yeah, I read this comment that Cooper made in an interview where he was learning the music and he was learning how to be a musician, but he was a very accomplished actor. She was a very accomplished musician and pop star, but was learning how to act. And the two of them could help each other, where one had strength, the other had weakness, and vice versa. And so that made them a really good pair to encourage each other and learn so much from one another during the production. So when he cast this movie, she was a very surprising choice. Nobody would have expected her to play the lead in a movie like this that's really down to earth and honest and authentic. She was the very embodiment of artifice, and that was her whole thing. Everything about her was very curated and intentional, and nobody really knew who the real Stephanie Germanotta was. Lady Gaga was like this beast on its own. So for her to get this part seemed surprising. He said that he was at an event, she was performing, and she performed La Vie en Rose, and he was gobsmacked by her. She's such a force on stage. She has this incredible voice, but beyond her voice, she's an amazing performer who emotes so beautifully and so authentically. In that moment, he said, this is the performer that Jackson would fall in love with. And he knew that she had acted in TV at that point. He decided to approach her and cast her for the film. She had to work really hard to get up to par with what was expected of her, but I think she delivered. Do I think she deserved the Oscar that year? Not really. I'm very happy that Olivia Colman won. And maybe Lady Gaga will win her Oscar someday. But that was the moment that he decided he believed in her. You know, the famous thing when that press tour. She said the same thing in every single interview. If there's a room of 100 people and just one of them believes in you.
This poor underdog that she was before that.
Well, it was kind of an incredible story. Not exactly rags to riches, but picking her out of anyone he could have had. At some point was Beyonce, although no shade on Beyonce. She's obviously incredible, but she's not exactly a world-class actress.
She's been fine in movies, but she was never asked to do this much. And according to the IMDb, she's top billed. The movie is sold more on Cooper's name. Well, maybe not, because Gaga's such a huge star. Didn't Gaga also present Best Picture this past year with Liza Minnelli? It was her, wasn't it?
Oh, yes,
and people are talking
right.
about her as somebody who can maybe host in the future, so that kind of thing. And she just did a great job with Minnelli, who seemed to be happy to be there, but also seemed like she didn't know where she was. Gaga's become that big a name that she's presenting Best Picture. You don't usually give that to a non-actor. In which case she's an actress now, but not really known for that first and foremost. But she is top billed on the IMDb, and I think that's Cooper's idea, which is this is her movie. She's probably in it more than he is.
Although I would say maybe the biggest flaw in the movie is that it's not as interested in Allie's interior life as it is in Jackson's. We learn all about Jackson's childhood, where his self-loathing came from, about his father, who wasn't exactly abusive, but definitely negligent and turned him into, as Bobby, his brother, says, his drinking buddy. We understand why he became an alcoholic and why he isn't emotionally mature enough to tolerate his wife's success, even though he loves her so much. But we never really get insight into why Allie puts up with him, because he crosses the line over and over. The word deal breaker doesn't even scratch the surface of some of his behavior. And it's established from the beginning. It's not like she's a starfucker. She's not impressed by his fame. In fact, she seems to treat it like more of a liability in the beginning, not an attraction at all. She has this argument with her father where he's like, why aren't you chasing this guy? And she's like, because he's a drunk. That's what really matters to her. And then maybe the most insightful moment in the movie, but you blink and you miss it.
I didn't notice this till you mentioned it.
They're having this argument, and she says to her father, who's trying to convince her to go after Jackson, he's a drunk. You know about that. And in that moment, he's really hurt by this thing that she's yelled at him. It cuts to the bone. And in the shot of Andrew Dice Clay, who plays her father, Lorenzo, he's standing there taken aback by what she said. And in the background of the shot is a wedding photo, presumably the wedding photo of him with her mother. Now, we never meet her mother. We never learn why her mother isn't in the picture. Is she dead? Did she abandon them? We don't know. But I think that the subtext in that shot, when she yells that at him, the implication is that her mother was a drunk. That's why he knows.
The dialogue, I thought, meant that he was the recovered alcoholic. But I think you're right when you point that out.
He is just a walking red flag, Jackson. It's not like it makes him a bad person, but it makes him a bad boyfriend. It makes him someone that you shouldn't hitch your wagon to.
Look at their second night together, where they end up back in his hotel room, and he's so loaded that he passes out when they're making out. She's obviously ready to have sex with him because she does the next morning. You pointed out when we were watching it, he probably smells terrible.
They should have just included a scene where he brushes his teeth and takes a shower, because there is no way that he does not smell repulsive in that moment. After drinking the way that he drank, he would be sweating whiskey. It would be disgusting. So the movie is clear that her commitment to him has nothing to do with her career. Of course, it helps her career a lot. She's happy to have a career, but I don't think she cares about becoming a star so much as she cares about making music and just being in the music industry and writing songs. She loves that people love her songs, but it's like her fame just seems to be this train that she's on that she can't control. As much as she lets Jackson control her, she then lets Rez control her. She's kind of a passive person in this way that she just lets the men in her life tell her what to do, which direction to go, what kind of music to sing. When she's with Jackson, she's singing the exact kind of music that Jackson sings. And when she's with Rez, she's suddenly a pop star.
She's Lady Gaga.
She's Lady Gaga, I know, which the movie seems to be implying is bad, is a disappointing thing that she should let her voice go in that way. But it's a funny insult to make when the star of your movie makes exactly that kind of music.
And you chose her. Well, I prefer the song she sings as Allie early on when she's a nobody. Of course,
Me
Shallow,
too.
but the one at the end as well, when all of this stories happened, and she's just standing there and belting, because Beyonce could have done this too. We've heard it with her. There are a lot of talented people out there, and there are other people that probably aren't, that need auto-tuning and need other kind of help. Britney Spears, who I've liked for a long time, I like a lot of her songs, listen to them pretty regularly. If you just put her in front of a microphone and ask her to sing, I don't think it's going to come off that well. Maybe not terribly, but Gaga in this movie, unless there's an awful lot of post-production work done, yes, she can just flat out sing, and I prefer what I've seen. I don't know her songs that well. I know some of the more famous ones. And when she does Shallow, with him, of course, and some of the other ones in this movie, she's so great at it. And when you see what little you do see of the pop songs, it seems like you're settling, and I think that's his biggest problem. We've already talked about this before a few times, because we've seen the movie a few times over the years, back in 2018 or maybe early 2019, whatever it was, and then watching it again a few days ago. But one of the most important scenes in the whole film is when he smears, what is it, a bagel with cream cheese on it?
I thought it was a donut,
Okay,
but
a donut.
it's food on her face.
And smears all over her face, not just a little dab on the nose. And of course, they call that back later at the wedding, where they both do it to each other with the wedding cake, which we've seen people do. Maybe not in reality. I've never seen people do that in reality, by the way. But you see it in movies and TV all the time, where it's supposed to be just fun and cute. But when he does it to her with, you said donut, what I thought was going on was that he's pissed off with her for settling for nothing wrong with it, I guess, but he thinks she can be better, and I agree. My taste for this person who I don't know that well, I'm talking meta now, so Lady Gaga herself, doing these great songs that she's just basically singing. Yeah, there's a piano and a guitar here and there, but it's not the electronic kind of stuff that Lady Gaga's famous for. And I think that's what Jackson Maine is saying too. You're settling for that? You can be better. He's not actually saying it. Maybe he does a little bit more literally say that in the bathtub scene, where he also calls her ugly, which apparently was an improv that shocked Lady Gaga, because of course that's one of the subtexts here. He's the heartthrob. Even looking as grungy as Bradley Cooper does in this movie, he's still even now such a heartthrob, and Lady Gaga at her best is okay looking.
She'd be the cute girl at your office, for sure.
Right, but he's the hot one of the two of them. Had it been him and Beyonce, then it'd be, well, I guess Beyonce's still the hot one, although Cooper's close. But here, he's the babe of the two of them, just like she's the mature one, and she's also the tougher one of the two of them. And you can throw Bobby in there, too. She's more, probably sounds weird, but the man of the three of them. Everybody seems to cry in this movie, all three of them. I've never seen Sam Elliott cry, I don't know if in any movie, and he tears up, I think, 3 times in this. She cries a few different times in this movie, including at the end. And Bradley Cooper has a dry cry at one point, and also gets teary during a scene we're going to talk about between the two brothers, the last scene they have together. But I know you don't fully agree with me, and tell the audience why, because my interpretation was, yes, it was a shitty thing to do. I would not deny that. But it wasn't supposed to be, I'm jealous of you, which she does say. It's more that I feel you could do better, and I'm too drunk to actually put that across, so I'll do this instead.
So the scene takes place not after she goes pop. The scene takes place after she meets Rez. There's a lot of scenes that are missing. We don't see a lot of the stuff that goes on. We just have to fill in the blanks. So we're not exactly sure where she is at in her career, but the audience has not been shown that she has gone pop at the point that this scene takes place. What has happened is that he feels like she's all his. She's his little protege, and everything she has is because of him. He knows that she's talented. He knows she has what it takes to do whatever she wants. But until the moment she meets Rez, and Rez says, I want to manage your career, and he's a big shot, and everybody knows who he is, so Jackson knows that this could be the moment, not that he loses her, but that he loses that perfect control. Suddenly, it's not this little circle of just the two of them in his world, because they're always in his world.
Yeah.
Another scene that I think is important that is very subtle, and I don't know if everybody notices this, but the scene where they get engaged. They get engaged after she's mad at him, after she basically says to him, if you ever do that again, he's a no-show at her first big show. She goes and finds him in Memphis, where he got too drunk to do anything.
Falls asleep on the street.
Falls asleep on the street!
In front of his old friend Noodles' house.
Yeah. She says to him, if you ever do that to me again, it'll be the last time. He then decides to propose to her, and he proposes to her with a guitar string, because that's just what's available in the room at the time.
Wrecks a guitar.
No, you don't have to wreck the guitar. It's just the excess string at the end of a guitar.
Okay.
When you're
All
tuning,
right.
But it struck me that it's something that feels significant because they both play music, but he's the guitar player. She's a piano player. And then they get
There's
married.
no piano in the house, I guess.
Okay, fine, but the screenwriter decided there wasn't a piano in their house. It's not like this is a real place and this is how it happened. And then they get married in front of his friends in Memphis, and her father's not there. She agrees to this. He does love her. I'm not saying he doesn't love her, but if he was not selfish, then he would never let her get married without her father there.
And her father's friends.
And her friend Ramon. I think I suggested a City Hall wedding for you and I. And you were like, we're having the proper wedding in front of our friends and family. And you would never have let us get married without my family there. But he doesn't think of it. And I don't think he's a bad person. I'm sure he's not a bad person.
He's still drunk that day, probably, for one thing.
He probably is still drunk. And he, like all people who have abuse issues, especially from a very young age, you never grow up. There's a thing I read in a Gabor Mate book that said somebody who abuses substances never matures beyond the age they were when they started abusing.
I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is illustrated
So he's
in
5.
his behavior. Well, yeah.
Or maybe 13-ish.
Yeah. He's trying to get his act together, but every time you get drunk,
He's not trying to get his act together.
No, you're right. I mean, he's trying to get his act together for her. I think he wants to be this person for her. But he keeps displaying extremely selfish behavior. Like I said, there's one red flag after another, one deal breaker after another. It's beyond just his drinking problem. He chooses himself over and over. So back to the scene where he smears her face with food. He's not trying to be cute. He's trying to demean her. You have these two actors making great choices where he is demeaning her and pretending that it's cute, and she's pretending to enjoy it and be in on it when she actually is furious and knows exactly what he's doing. She even says to him, oh, are you jealous that I'm seeing some success, that some good thing is happening in my career? Does it make you threatened? And that's why you're acting like this. But then the second she turns away from him, and a beautiful bit of performance, and she faces the camera and away from him, and you see her face change in an instant. She goes from being amused to being, maybe not furious,
Disgusted anyway.
Disgusted, yes. Borderline contempt on her face that she just cannot believe she has to deal with this baby, that she has to clean up his mess and parent him through this latest episode of drinking way, way, way too much. And when they show his alcoholism, they are not pussyfooting around. He is a mess.
And also his drug taking, he's smashing Oxy with his boot and just snorting it right up.
Yeah. He's really self-destructive.
And drinking, not quite day and night. He's not always drunk in this movie until he goes to rehab, when he's not anymore, until the very last scene he has. There are times when he's sober here and there, but not very often. So I'm getting the feeling that he more often than not has a wake-me-up beer when he does get up for the day, which for a rock star could be the middle of the afternoon.
And you have to wonder if he's lying to her. There's a line when he shows up to her house and he has a motorcycle, and she says to him, I'll never get on that bike when you're drinking. And he's like, I'm sober as a judge over here, or whatever he says. Is he? Sometimes he seems to be able to just quit drinking and it doesn't hurt, but anybody who drinks like that, it's not that easy. You physically get sick.
Well, it looks like it was early in the day, so maybe it's been a few hours. But then again, he's the kind of guy that, like I just said, wakes up and has a drink probably way more often than not. The way the rest of us who drink water or coffee, he's pouring liquor.
There is a scene where they're in their home and she's saying, are you drinking right now? It's breakfast time.
Well, if I misread that scene, then that's fine, because I think there's a lot of things going on there. And maybe that's the guy thing in me. But I like the notion that he's not being cruel, because I haven't seen the other A Star is Born movies in a long time. But I think there's a little less depth in those, and maybe a little less sympathy. James Mason, the 54 version with Judy Garland, is definitely a jealousy thing, but it's also a matter of, I discovered her as an actress, because in that it's acting. In Christopherson and Streisand version, it's singing. And I think the very first one was also acting. So you got 4 actors and you got 4 singers in these 4 movies. But in the Mason one, well, all 3 of the other ones, the way that Norman Maine, not Jackson Maine, kills himself is to walk off into the ocean, probably the Pacific, and drown himself intentionally. I guess get caught in an undertow or something, and not fight it so you can drown and die. It might be what's going on in this movie, too, where it's, if I don't go away permanently, then she will never be what she can be, and I'm dragging her down. That's what this movie's doing. We'll talk about that in a second. But the other versions, without having seen them in a long time, I think there's some of that, but it's more a matter of, I don't want to live in this world if I can't be what I once was, especially when what I once was is living with me. And that's great, and I'm proud of her, and I'm thrilled for her, but also, God damn it. So I think it's more, I think it's, yes. So I know those ones have a jealousy aspect, and this does too, but I think this is more a matter of, here's a guy who was always fucked up, and who's just more than anything else, we've seen this in other movie and TV characters who are addicts or alcoholics or both, but this is one of the best examples I've ever seen of a guy who's not comfortable in his own skin. Jackson Maine drunk can get by. Jackson Maine sober, I think, is just a chattering mess. I'm a little bit surprised he doesn't play at that bobbing leg thing that people do, the nervous energy with the leg, or some kind of nervous twitch, or maybe smoking constantly when he's not drinking. He actually does seem fairly calm in the rehab scenes, and then when he is home for a little while, and I don't think he is drinking. I don't think he's lying to anybody. I think he really is staying off the sauce and off the pills. But here's a guy with so many issues who also, in a lot of ways, is doing what he thinks is the right thing, because it's a cruel scene where Rez tells him, you're dragging her down. He's not telling him, go kill yourself. I think he's probably subtextually saying, you need to go away. But Jack knows he can't really go away because Allie won't accept that, and Allie won't stay away. What proves that in this movie is, I think the very next scene, after the Rez scene, is him laying in the bed. Maybe it's the same day. And Allie comes home, and they have a little bit of a canoodle, and she says, I've canceled the summer tour. The record's doing great. And you don't need to tour with a successful record? That's exactly when you tour with a successful record. But anyway, she says she's going to cancel the tour. Chronologically, I may have this messed up a little bit. It may not be very long after. I think it might be the next day. I'm not sure. That he decides to kill himself. Now, that could be something he thought of in a matter of minutes. But he does take a lot of pills first. And those don't work that fast. But he does it as a bit of a mercy to save her by killing himself. And I'm not so sure in the other versions if it's as much of a help to the person you love.
A selfless act. Suicide
is
a
not
selfless act.
Selfless entirely, but more so than a
not.
lot of versions, including in A Star is Born, the other versions of it, or in other movies and shows.
Perfectly selfless act, I suppose, would be him just getting his act together properly, but he doesn't believe he can do
but
that.
Rez
I don't
says
believe he can do that.
You can't do it.
No,
and
he can't
him
do
killing himself proves that he agrees with him.
Of course, it's so complicated. It's never going to be as simple as him saying, well, I have to kill myself to save Allie. Did she go to Europe? I don't think she did. They show her just crying in the house and losing it altogether instead of going on tour for her career. Her husband dying like that is not going to help her career either. This is a person who tried to kill himself for the first time when he was a child, when he was 13 years old. And tries to kill himself in the exact same way he ultimately kills himself by hanging himself from the ceiling in a room in his house. Mm-hmm. The first time it doesn't work out, he treats it like a joke. But I think this is a person who hates himself so much that he's just been white-knuckling life.
For 30 years now.
For 30, 40 years. Who knows? Maybe
but
his
30
entire
years
life.
since that.
Yeah. Since that first suicide attempt, this has just been him trying to get through day by day without wanting to die. And I know this isn't the reason that everybody who has substance abuse problems uses, but I think in the case of Jackson, his substance abuse is kind of like slow motion suicide. He can't cope with himself. He can't live within his own skin, as you say. So the alcohol and the drugs numb it, but they also do what he's wanted to do all along, which is kill him. So it's not to save Allie so much as the shame of knowing that his behavior is not just ruining his own life, but it's ruining the life of the person that he loves the most, is the trigger that puts him over the edge so that he truly just can't stand himself anymore. And maybe he convinces himself that this is an altruistic act. This isn't a selfish thing that I'm doing. This is something I'm doing for Allie. And that is the rationalization that gets him over the hump so that he has the courage to actually pull it off. The courage to do something that he hasn't had the courage to do his whole life. I hate wording it like this because it's barely an act, in my opinion. It's more like the fatal version of a mental illness and failure of society to truly help people who are this desperately in need. It's a tragedy that he dies by suicide, not just for himself. And I think actually the movie does a good job of showing that he didn't help her. He certainly didn't help his brother Bobby either. We haven't talked much about his brother Bobby, played by
Sam Elliott.
Sam Elliott. And a truly beautiful and heartbreaking performance.
One of the best things he's ever done.
He is the man who half raised him. His father died shortly after his suicide attempt. His father successfully killed himself. I can't remember how he died, actually. Did he kill himself?
He might have. Well, the mother died when Jack was born, so he never knew her at all.
Yeah, he had no mother to speak of because she died in childbirth.
And the father was no father.
And the father was no father. He was like his drinking buddy. He was much older than him. He was in his 60s when he was born. And he was very much raised by his brother, who didn't choose to have a son, but was accidentally responsible for his little brother, and who is probably going to spend the rest of his life feeling guilty about not saving him.
Well, he says to Allie in that really great scene the two of them have together, Elliot and Gaga sitting down in the hallway of her place, it's his fault, not yours. But there's a subtext there going on clearly where he has to convince himself of that, and I don't think he believes that. I think he will feel guilty. I would, if it was me in his shoes, even if I couldn't have actually done anything about it. He's probably always going to feel guilty he didn't do something about that. And that was originally supposed to be, apparently, Andrew Dice Clay, so Allie's father sitting with her talking about that. And that would have been fine. But then Sam Elliott was so touched that Cooper said, no, the scene works better if it's the two people that are closest to Jackson talking about the guy who died, rather than the person who's closest to him, and then somebody who knew him a little bit and has a couple of scenes with him and was starstruck by him, yes. But here's the guy that meant the most to him for his whole life, and now the woman who meant the most to him in this part of his life. And another scene where Sam Elliott tears up.
Well, you got to talk about the scene now. The scene.
Well, the scene I love the most, and I know that it's a love story between a man and a woman, and it's great, and I don't want to discount any of that, and Gaga's fantastic. But I've watched it on YouTube so many times, and maybe that's why I didn't get teary watching it with you this time, although we've talked about this so many times the last few days that I forget if we've said in this recording, but you would have been buckets of water had it not been for the fact you're sitting beside me. And the dogs also distracted you as part of it, too, and they wanted to go outside right when the movie was ending. Could you just leave us alone for a minute? They wouldn't. But for me, I probably would have been more emotional if I was watching the movie alone, and maybe because I had just seen this scene not long ago again for I don't know how many times on YouTube. But it's when Bobby drives Jack home from rehab. One thing I like about the scene so much is the way that Cooper stumbles on the words. Of course, he knows the dialogue he helped write. He's one of the screenwriters in this. I don't think he was struggling to remember, what am I supposed to say here? And they didn't cut. He didn't call cut. And then the scene worked because of the stumble. I think it was intentionally played that way.
Struggling to be vulnerable in front of
Actors always talk about choices. And then some people misinterpret that and think, oh, taking this role. No, it's not about taking roles. It's about choices in the character. You could play that scene 100 ways. Brando might not have played that any better than Cooper did. And the way that he stumbles on the, stole your voice, and then he hesitates, doesn't know how to put it, and then it was you I idolized, it wasn't Dad. Because earlier on in the scene where he comes up and he punches Bobby in the face when he finds out that Bobby sold the ranch, their dad's ranch, where the dad was buried, I guess. And Jack didn't know because he was so goddamn drunk. You were so drunk, I told you, I forgot. When he stumbles on it was you I idolized, it wasn't Dad, and he walks away, that's so touching for 100 reasons, but one of them is because he does struggle with what he says, and then nothing else is said. And maybe the most famous part of that scene is when Elliot backs out of the driveway, and he's teary-eyed. He's not quite crying.
He's got to get out of there before he's confronted with his own emotions.
And maybe go in and talk to his brother and get over some of these things and maybe have a good cry together.
I think this is a movie that has a very keen understanding of gender roles and how they affect the way men and women emotionally interact with one another. You talk about how Allie is in many ways the strongest person in the movie, and certainly in this little triad between Bobby and Jackson and herself. She's the strong one, and she has to also really manage Jackson in so many scenes and pretend to be cute or happy about something that she's actually fully aware of what's going on and upset about it.
Bobby did that kind of thing before, but he probably didn't pretend to be cute or enjoying himself.
No, he could have handled it in a different way, but because she's a woman, she has to manage his ego, she has to manage Rez's ego, she has to keep all these people happy because that is just gender dynamics. I don't think the movie's condoning it. I think the movie understands it in a way that's very sympathetic to her character and her position. But I also think that it's a beautiful illustration of how gender dynamics are so harmful to men, too. These are two men who love each other so much. And it takes months in rehab for Jackson to get up the nerve to basically tell his brother he loves him in so many words, but he can't even say he loves him. He can tell Allie he loves her. He was the first to tell her that he loves her, told her on stage. You could dissect that as well, that in the moment he told her was a safe place for him to say that versus a more intimate place where they were alone and she could have responded however she wanted. But he cannot tell Bobby how much he means to him without this struggle, without painfully expressing it. And then what does he do? As soon as the words are out of his mouth, that door slammed, he's gone. Mm-hmm. And then what does Bobby do? As soon as he hears that,
get out of there.
He's just reverse.
Hit the gas.
Out of there. They kind of know this about each other, but they can't express their feelings that way. Me and my sister, we tell each other we love each other all the time. We can be very emotive and expressive. Me and my girlfriends can be really emotive and expressive. This is the main advantage of being a woman, is that you get to have this vulnerability and this intimacy that is so much harder for men, and it breaks your heart. If he had been a woman, could he have more avenues to heal these scars that his father gave him simply because society would give him permission to be vulnerable with the people who love him? But he has to be such a dude about it, and that is what's so heartbreaking about that scene.
And also, what is the dialogue? You know, you said I took your voice, you know? When they were having the fight, it was just took my fucking voice. The funny thing, too, is that Cooper, when he sings, like so many people do, talks like Sam Elliott. He worked on that apparently for months, too, where he's always talking like this.
Before he cast Sam Elliott.
Right, yeah. What if he didn't get the role? But then when he's singing, it's more high-pitched, so it's I'm going to talk like this, but I'm going to sing like this type of thing. I didn't know for the longest time some of the big musical acts were English or Australian bands, because they don't sound that way. Mel Gibson, when he does some of these big yelly roles, I don't think I really heard the Australian accent in there, but more so as singers. I didn't know some of these bands were English until you hear them talk and think, oh my God, are you ever English? But it's the same thing with this. When he's singing, he sounds different. And maybe because Cooper can imitate Elliott talking, but he can't do it as a singer as well. But anyway, the whole, not so much even subtext, but text of, you stole my fucking voice. And what Jackson criticizes Bobby about is that he didn't have anything to say, which means you didn't really have a voice. His biggest problem with Allie, I thought, and I guess maybe my timing on that is wrong, if she hadn't become the pop star yet, is, what's your voice? Your voice is what made you a star, just singing. And yeah, playing some piano and there's accompanying instruments. And there's nothing wrong, well, the movie might think there was something wrong with pop music, but I don't think there's anything wrong with pop music. And it's great that Gaga or the character can be good at that too, but it's almost like, you're going to settle for that? But of the three of them, I guess the supposedly most authentic one, whoever, because they're all singers. We don't see evidence of this with Bobby. We just know he is because they talk about it. But it's supposed to be that Jackson had the most authentic voice. But he's also the one that struggles with himself the most. These other two people will probably eventually move on and have some kind of life. The great song at the end that had you in tears.
Had me in tears earlier today when I was listening to it on Spotify.
Okay. I'll Never Love Again. One of the many great songs. You only have one Oscar nomination from this with Shallow. Outstanding song. A lot of subtext there. Well, even text. When she's singing it for him in the parking lot, she says the line falling. And I guess the notion there, obviously, is that she's actually falling for him. When he sings it in the first bit, he says fallen. And then when she sings it, she emphasizes the G. I don't think it matters, but it's just a little bit of difference. I like the touch that she says
voices.
Falling. But then also the great song she sings midway through the movie, the one that makes her a big star, the one that gets Rez to want to actually manage her, is Always Remember Us This Way. So this movie has got so many great songs in it. I prefer all of those to her doing Lady Gaga, Gaga, Gaga. Now, she might as well be. So that's an inauthentic voice to him.
The pop songs that they have her singing in this movie, it's not even just that they're okay pop songs, it's that they're especially shallow and the lyrics don't make sense for her character. Oh, your ass and them jeans. Who are you? That's not something Allie would say. It is inauthentic.
She's also sexualized, too. She's showing off her cleavage more.
Yeah, she's always sexy in her own way in the movie, but this sexy pop star writhing around and dancing and wearing skin-tight clothes doesn't seem like it's her persona. It's funny how Jackson is always telling her, you'll be successful as long as you are you, as long as you have something to say. It's the same with, you stole my voice. Your voice, this is a main theme of this movie, of people expressing themselves properly. But you have all these people who are so broken and bad at expressing themselves, and yet prioritizing this, or saying that they prioritize this. But I think Allie, in the first hour of the film, when she is touring with Jackson, she's just mimicking Jackson. She's mimicking his musical style. She's dressing like him. She has this whole country western look that starts happening that you never see her wear before or since. So he thinks that she's expressing her voice, but it could just be him projecting that that's what he wants her to be like because she's trying to please him. She's just trying to mirror him.
And she wouldn't have any of this if it weren't for him. It is true.
No, that's true. And Rez comes along, and Rez is ready to take her to the next level. What is it he says after he sees her? He's like, you're much bigger than this. You're bigger than tagging along with this act, with this, let's face it, has-been.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to really explore your potential on your own, but you have to leave this behind. And then she does everything Rez wants. We don't feel like this is her authentic self either. She changes the color of her hair. She's clearly very uncomfortable with that. But in the last scene of the movie, when she's singing the beautiful song that makes me sob real tears, her hair is brown again. Because I think maybe we're meant to believe that after all this tragedy, at least the good thing that'll come of it is she'll be like, why am I doing any of this? If it's not to sing the way I want, sing the songs I want, express myself and be myself. I hope she fires Rez. He's such a villain. He has that one true villain moment where he convinces Jackson to kill himself.
No, he doesn't convince him to kill himself.
He's not convincing. I don't think he wants him to die. But he's very mean to him, and he is trying to convince him to, at the very least, go away.
But Jack knows that's not going to be enough. Well, she won't stay away.
Because she loves Jackson too much. Everyone says, oh, he's such a bad guy. But really, he goes up to her and is like, I'm going to make you a star. And then he makes her a star.
She could sign with somebody else.
Okay, fine. But it looks like within a few weeks she's on SNL. And then later that year she's winning a Grammy. That, of course, is not really how it happens. But you can't deny that by following Rez's advice, she becomes a star. Exactly like she wants to, or it seems like she wants to. But does she ever find her voice, is my question. Maybe the only song in the whole movie that is truly hers is Shallow, although not even that, because she kind of writes that with Jackson.
And he makes her come up on stage. Is that nice? Is that a bit of a cruelty, actually, to play her song, which the band learns fast? That's the next day after he heard her just warbling a little bit in a parking lot. There was no music in the first place.
It's movie magic.
So he wrote the music, and they had to learn it in a day. And he was undoubtedly hungover as well. They were up till the early morning. The two of them were. Well, the cast in this movie, there's some eclectic choices for acting in this movie, but the headliners, of course, are Lady Gaga and then Bradley Cooper. Gaga was in House of Gucci. I guess it might be technically 2 years ago now that this goes up in 2023. We're recording this in 2022. She's good in that movie. A lot of other people are not. I think she was actually pretty good. I don't know if she was Oscar-worthy in that. And then she won a Golden Globe for American Horror Story on television. And she said her personality is nothing like Ally. She's confident and she's ambitious. And she's not somebody that needs to be made to go up on stage. And she obviously made something of herself without being, that I'm aware of, tagging along with some act in the first place, the way she does in this movie.
She is a person who knows her voice and is not shy about using it, to say the least.
One thing you also have to remember about any performer as well, what does the audience want from you? And they're not even consistent all the time with that, because somebody can be the most favorite thing in the world as a singer, but more so as an actor, I guess, for 5, 10, 20 years, and then suddenly just get out of our faces. We have enough of you.
Yeah.
And then maybe they come back. I remember saying this about Charlize Theron in the early 2000s. She seemed to be in every fucking thing. I was getting tired of her. And then she does Monster, and I thought, okay, fine, give me more of this. She is phenomenal in that movie. But I really didn't like her much in 2001 and maybe into 2002 because she seemed to be in every fucking thing. And I changed my mind. So I could be fickle too. And that's part of the problem too, because a lot of people might hear this and think, well, Ryan, or even Bev, what is her voice? Well, how can you say what her voice is? I'm not trying to. I'm just saying what I think her best voice is that we see portrayed. And the audience in general may not even know what they want all the time, and they might change their minds too.
And look how many performers, including Lady Gaga, reinvent themselves with every album or just have different eras. She's so bold about dramatically changing whatever it is she wants to do, whatever she wants to portray. She's incredibly gutsy. Yeah. She's made some missteps. She's done some weird, embarrassing things. But she never seems to care about it, worry what we think.
Right. Cooper has 9 Oscar nominations in his career, 3 for this film. If we didn't say this already, Willie Nelson's son trained Bradley Cooper on guitar for a very long time. And then the singing, Cooper thought, I can sing and play guitar. I'm an actor. I'm good at all these things. And he found out pretty fast, wait a minute, this is going to take some time.
He does his own singing, but he is not the guitar. When you hear guitar, it is Willie Nelson's son performing the guitar parts for him.
But he looks like he's playing it at least.
Yeah, because he's actually playing it, but that's not what we hear. Right. I'm sure it sounds better than what he was playing.
Well, Gaga wanted him to sing live as well because she thinks the lip syncing in movies always looks fake. Sam Elliott, we've covered him only a few times before. Cameos, basically. The tiny bit in Butch Cassidy, the very beginning. He's the guy playing Robert Redford in Cards at the very beginning of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And then, of course, one of the great cameos of all time in The Big Lebowski as the Stranger. Andrew Dice Clay is in this, of course, as the father. He was pretty good in Blue Jasmine for Woody Allen several years earlier. Controversial stand-up comic, as is Dave Chappelle, who's had a lot of second fiddle roles in his career of acting. He hasn't really acted that much in more recent history, but he did in the 90s and such. Also a lightning rod for controversy, brings it on himself a lot of the time.
So apparently he begged Chappelle to take the part. He didn't want to do it, and Cooper pursued him really hard. Not sure why. Feel like a lot of people could have done this part. Not saying Chappelle was bad, but also, why did it have to be him? I'm not feeling it. Also, and you and I disagree on this, I'm not saying that Andrew Dice Clay is bad. He's like a B+ at best.
I think he does a great job as our dad.
Yeah, I think most people agree with you. I just don't see what everyone sees.
Okay. And Ron Rifkin's the other actor I want to mention. He is the guy in Rehab. They discuss the fact that Jack tried to kill himself at 13 but failed, and they both snicker about it. Interesting that they laugh it off. Rifkin, by the way, was born on Halloween, so I got to love that about him. He has over 120 credits, including he's the DA in L.A. Confidential, which we covered many years ago, one of the great movies of the 90s, L.A. Confidential. This is Cooper's directing debut, of course. He will do a Leonard Bernstein biopic. I think that's probably going to be sometime this year, directing that again and also playing Leonard Bernstein. He co-wrote with Eric Roth and Will Fetters. Roth won an Oscar for Forrest Gump and has written a lot of big screenplays over the years, and Fetters was one of the writers on Hustle just last year, the Adam Sandler film. And of course, in a way, it's based on the prior screenplays, even though it's its own thing. It was nominated for an Oscar, but William Wellman in the 1937 one, Joan Didion and Frank Pearson, they wrote the 76 one. Cooper, Bill Gerber, Lynette Howell Taylor were all nominated for Oscars. There were 14 producers. Gerber produced Gran Torino for Clint Eastwood, and Taylor produced Blue Valentine, another movie about a tough romance with Ryan Gosling and Michelle Williams. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The movie's 239-1. We got the DVD from the Toronto Public Library. It is not on Crave, even though it's a Warner Brothers product. I think it should be on Crave, but okay. Matthew Libatique shot the movie. He's worked with Darren Aronofsky a lot over the years. We've covered Requiem for a Dream and Mother, which he shot, and then also Iron Man, he shot that, and we covered that as well. And the editor, Jay Cassidy, cut Silver Linings Playbook and American Hustle for David O. Russell, that of course Cooper was in, and also many Sean Penn films over the years. I think he's always Penn's editor. And there's no composer credit on this, I guess because it's a musical in a way with these songs. In a way,
it's all diegetic, isn't it?
Gaga and Mark Ronson and so on who wrote the music for this, but there's not an actually listed composer on IMDb. What do you think of the look, the cutting, the writing, producing, all that stuff?
I think it's lovely. I think it's really consistent throughout, and you can probably safely assume because he's a first-time director and because he's an actor who's probably focusing on performances, people like the cinematographer and the editor, production designer, roles like that, they probably had a lot of power, a lot of influence over him, and it was probably very collaborative. And I think they came together to execute a really lovely vision with a consistent tone. Libatique
has shot some pretty hardcore movies with Aronofsky, so maybe he was the right choice for shooting this film, and was nominated for an Oscar for it as well. What happens next? Well, Allie meets another older, self-destructive man, falls hard for him too, and lets his shit actually ruin her career because he won't do the noble thing and just kill himself.
No, she'll never love again, she said so. She's not going to start another fire.
I think she's going to fall for somebody else in the future. All right then, last thoughts on your first choice of this year, and obviously of the month, A Star is Born.
Well, this is my, I think, third time watching it over the last 5 years, and the shine is not wearing off for me at all. As a matter of fact, I think I like it more each time I see it.
There's a lot of depth. It's one of the best.
High praise.
It's one of the best remakes in recent memory. Cooper's range is phenomenal, and this does not feel like a first-time director doing this at all. For a relative novice, Gaga matches him, I'd say. By the way, as we wrap here, we had to record this twice because I didn't plug in the mic properly, and the computer audio recorded it, so it would have sounded very hollow. So if we missed anything important, it could be because we already talked about it and we forgot what we've said. And of course, we discussed this after we saw it, too, and even during it. So we've talked about this movie in many ways in the last week and a half, a ton of times.
You know, if you're not careful, Ryan, my manager is going to come have a real bleak conversation with you one of these days.
Well, if I may quote Big Lebowski that Sam Elliott's in, dude, are you fucking this up? Yes, I was fucking this up, John Goodman. Okay, well, we'll close the book on A Star is Born. In 4 days, I'll be posting another solo show. This time, my oral essay will be talking about a Buster Keaton joint. This will be the first time a movie of his has come up on this channel in nearly 10 years. He's a projectionist. He's an aspiring detective, and he's a lover, not a fighter. He's Sherlock Jr. Movie's almost 100 years old. Going to cover it in 4 days. As for next Monday, Bev and I will be talking about a box office failure that redefined the careers of many people. George Clooney was still thought of as a TV actor and a bad Batman. Jennifer Lopez wasn't yet a massive superstar. And Steven Soderbergh had an underwhelming 90s after Sex, Lies, and Videotape made him a big player in the industry a decade earlier. It's the comedy crime film where George loves J-Lo, and we ask, da-da!
Have you ever seen?
Out of Sight. The coming attractions trivia for Out of Sight. Steven Soderbergh has made some films that got scorched on Rotten Tomatoes, but mostly he's directed movies that got fresh tomatoes, usually with very strong reviews, in fact. Only one theatrically released film that he directed rates higher than Out of Sight. What is it?
So for the answer to that question, check out next week's podcast about Out of Sight. You obviously already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen. If you already followed us as Top 100 Project, nothing will change, including access to our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. We're both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis Ellis and Ryan is at MovieFiend51. You can also reach us by email, haveyouveurseenpodcast@gmail.com. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
Tell me something, Bev. The word is cut. It'll end this podcast.
I'm cutting. And cut.